We got Tales of Destiny on the PlayStation. Then we got Tales of Destiny 2. Except that wasn't actually Tales of Destiny 2. The real sequel never made it to the West. And somehow, all these years later, it still hasn't. And that's just one of the games we're talking about today. We've got a Nintendo RPG that became an absolute legend, a Square game that just never left Japan, one of the best-looking 2D RPGs of its generation, and even a game where you're basically running around catching monsters before the entire planet gets wiped out. So yeah, these are 6 awesome JRPGs that never made it to the West. Some of them actually have pretty understandable reasons, others not so much. And we're kicking things off with a game that somehow became a cult classic in the West without ever getting an official Western release. Let's start with Mother 3, the RPG that got famous in the West without ever actually being released here. It came out on the Game Boy Advance in Japan in April 2006. It's the sequel to Earthbound, or Mother 2, that Super Nintendo RPG fans basically worship today. Except back in 1995, Earthbound bombed in the US, and a lot of that came down to one of the strangest campaigns Nintendo ever ran, built around the slogan, "This game stinks." I made a whole video about that disaster. It's in the card up top if you want to check it out. The cult classic status came years later, long after the damage was done. And to Nintendo's executives, the franchise still had that reputation of being a risky niche. Earthbound was created by Shigesato Itoi, who isn't even really from the games industry. He's an advertising guy. Getting Mother 3 out at all was already a 10-year saga. The game was announced, canceled, disappeared for an entire console generation, and eventually came back to life on a handheld. And then, Nintendo just didn't bring it over. They never officially said why, but I mean, the dots aren't exactly hard to connect. The last game had bombed over here, and nobody upstairs wanted to take that bet again. But the fans weren't having it. The community translated the game themselves. A group led by Clyde Mandolin, aka Tomato, who happens to be a professional game translator, took on nearly 1,000 pages of text. The translation came out in 2008 and passed 100,000 downloads in its first week. There was even a fan-made printed guide, 200 full-color pages. Yeah, way too polished for something Nintendo itself wasn't willing to do. In 2024, Nintendo finally put Mother 3 on the Switch's classic service, Japan only. Almost 20 years later, Mother 3 was officially available on a Nintendo platform again, and it still couldn't make it out of Japan. Back in the 90s, you could at least blame Earthbound's flop. At this point, honestly, it's just laziness. But there's another case where the company that dropped the game was the very same one bringing some of the biggest RPGs our way. In the 90s, the company feeding the West its RPGs was Squaresoft. So explain to me how Square left Bahamut Lagoon behind, a game that sold nearly 500,000 copies in Japan and was one of the 20 best-selling games of the year. It came out on the Super Famicom in February 1996. It's a tactical RPG, grid and turn-based, with an idea nobody else was doing quite like it: dragons. You raise, feed, and evolve your dragons, and they fight as their own units on the battlefield. What you feed them changes their loyalty and changes the creature itself. Half strategy, half raising a fire-breathing pet dragon. On the team was Hironobu Sakaguchi, the creator of Final Fantasy, supervising, and Kazushige Nojima, who'd go on to write Final Fantasy VII and X. Big names. Now, as for why it never came over, it was probably the timing. Bahamut Lagoon was one of Square's last Super Famicom games right when the company was jumping to Sony's PlayStation to make Final Fantasy VII, a cartridge at the end of a console's life from a company with its eyes on the next generation. You know, you can see why nobody rushed to translate it. It does have a fan translation and a careful one, and playing it today with those dragons and that team, it's hard to accept that this was the Square RPG nobody here got to buy. Square dropped Bahamut because it had its eye on another console. The next game got dropped because its whole console sank over here. Before Vanillaware existed, before Odin Sphere, before Muramasa, before Dragon's Crown, there was this one. Prince's Crown is where it all started. It came out on the Sega Saturn in Japan in late 1997. It's a 2D action RPG, hand-drawn with that watercolor look that's still the studio's signature today. The combat plays out from the side in one-on-one duels, mixing action with RPG progression. The director was George Kamitani, who came from Capcom, from the Dungeons & Dragons beat-em-ups, and he's the one who, carries that style through the rest of his career. The problem is, it showed up late. The Saturn was already on its last legs, and in the West, the console had failed badly. The game sold poorly even in Japan, about 11,000 at launch, and it helped sink the studio that made it. A gorgeous game, trapped on a console that had already lost the war over here. But there was a PSP port in 2005 and a PlayStation 4 one in 2020 that also didn't come out in English. Prince's Crown is just one of the many Saturn RPG gems that stayed locked in Japan. And there's a whole franchise that fits that same sentence, except its case is the most frustrating one on the list, because this time there were people fighting to bring it over. Take one of the most beloved franchises in Japan, anime, manga, even a stage musical. Now, imagine that for more than 10 years, the West basically couldn't touch the main games. This is Sakura Wars. The series started in 1996 on the Saturn, mixing strategy, giant robots, visual novel, and dating sim inside a Japan inspired by the 1920s. You command a squad of girls who pilot mechs and, between battles, talk with them and build up your relationships. And the formula became a phenomenon in Japan. Except the first 4 games stayed over there. The first 2 came out on the Saturn, and the third and fourth on the Dreamcast in 2001 and 2002. While the series grew and became one of Sega's most important franchises in Japan, everyone in the West just watched from a distance. And it wasn't for lack of interest. There were localization attempts, but the problem was simple. Too much text, too much voice acting, and a ton of stuff very specific to Japanese culture. Translating and adapting all of that cost a lot for a series that, over here, nobody knew would sell. It wasn't until 2010 that NIS America brought over the 5th game, So Long My Love, and the 2019 reboot did get an official release too. In other words, the games that stayed stuck in Japan were exactly the 4 that built the series' reputation. And if Sakura Wars was too big for anyone to want to foot the localization bill, the next game had the opposite problem. It was small, obscure, and strange in a way nobody even knew how to sell. Lyn the Cube came out in 1995 on the PC Engine Super CD, Japan only. And the premise is simple. You're on the planet Neo Kenya. A giant meteor nicknamed the Reaper is going to destroy everything in 8 years. And there's no stopping it. There's no hero saving the planet, no final boss to fix the problem. The only way out is an Ark that shows up. And you, playing as Ken, along with Linda, get one mission. Capture pairs of animals and get everyone inside before the world ends. That's it. The game is about collecting animals before the apocalypse. The creator, Shoji Masuda, came from Tengai Makio 2, a Dragon Quest-style RPG, and wanted to make basically the opposite of a traditional RPG. No chosen hero, no villain trying to take over the world, and above all, no way to stop the disaster. The game itself was marketed as a psychological horror and hunting RPG, and capturing the animals is pretty peculiar. You beat on them until you can catch them, and then you decide what to do. Put them in the Ark, sell them, or turn them into meat, which can become an item. Cute, right? The 3 in the name isn't there by accident either. The original game has 3 parallel scenarios, each telling a different story in the same world and raising the number of animals you have to capture. And, well, this one I barely need to explain. It was strange, extremely niche, and came out practically at the end of the PC Engine's life. Later, it got a new version on the PlayStation in 1997 and another on the Saturn in 1998. And yeah, it all stayed in Japanese. It wasn't until 2024 that a fan translation showed up for the PlayStation version. Linda Cube never became one of those giant RPGs, but it ended up earning a cult reputation precisely for being so different. And if this one stayed stuck in Japan for being too strange, the last one on the list is the exact opposite. In 1998, we got Tales of Destiny on the PlayStation. It was one of those JRPGs with everything you'd expect from a Tales: 2D characters, anime look, real-time combat. It was also one of the first games in the series to reach the West. So far, so normal, except 3 years later, Namco launched another Tales over here and called the game Tales of Destiny 2. There was just one detail. It wasn't Tales of Destiny 2. The game we got under that name was actually Tales of Eternia. Different story, different characters, different game. In Japan, it was never called Destiny 2. Namco simply changed the name for the Western market. Tales of Destiny was already known over here, so slapping a 2 on the title seemed like an easy way to make the game sound like a sequel. Then, when the real Tales of Destiny 2 came out in Japan in 2002, bringing it over meant dealing with a naming mess the company itself had created. Tales of Destiny 2 sold really well in Japan, getting close to 1 million copies. The press received the game very warmly, and it even got a PSP version a few years later. Except, none of those versions reached the West in English. Not the PlayStation 2, not the PSP, and so we get a kind of ridiculous situation. In Japan, the series had Tales of Destiny, Tales of Eternia, and Tales of Destiny 2. In the West, it was Tales of Destiny and a Tales of Destiny 2 that was actually Eternia. And to this day, there's no official explanation. The most likely story is that it was a combination of things. The earlier Tales games didn't sell in the West what they sold in Japan, localizing an RPG that size back then cost a lot, and then there was the dumb naming thing on top. Then you look at now. Tales of Eternia, the game that got the name Tales of Destiny 2 in the West, is coming back remastered this year, this time under its original name. Meanwhile, the real sequel is still stuck in Japan. But with the remasters rolling out for the Tales franchise's 30th anniversary, who knows, maybe in a few years the real Tales of Destiny 2 shows up over here. In the end, none of these games stayed in Japan for the same reason. One basically died with its console, another was too expensive to localize, one was probably just too weird to sell. And with Tales of Destiny 2, Namco somehow managed to create a problem that wasn't even there in the first place. Nowadays, pretty much all of these games have a fan translation, a re-release, or at least a community still keeping them alive. So yeah, the audience was there all along. It just took a couple decades to prove it. Now I want to know, which of these 6 would you have actually bought back then if it had come out in the West? And if I missed one, drop it in the comments. There's definitely enough weird stuff like this for a part 2. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.